Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here and welcome to Baconport. See what I did there? Okay, so today is going to be another guide on for Elite Dangerous, as I've been doing several of these so far. And today's guide is actually going to be about Warzones. So basically, what are Warzones? They're instance random events where players can compete against each other in PvE combat or PvE combat. So there's going to be a bunch of NPC ships flying around, and there's going to be a bunch of players flying around. You can engage either one depending on which faction you choose. It's a bit like bounty hunting, with a slight twist to it. So first things first, we're going to have a look at our outfitting, because as compared to the outfitting I showed you for bounty hunting, this is a little bit different. So here we have the Cobra Mark III, and straight off the bat you can see this is very different to the outfitting that I was using on the Eagle, and there's a very good reason for that. When you're going bounty hunting, you're going to be up against ships that have a reasonable amount of bounty on them. Like, you're going to be looking at things that are in the 1,000 to 2,000 credit range for the starters, up to 20,000 to 40,000 credits for the big game kills, and even up to hundreds of thousands of credits if you're looking for the named NPC targets. So, for bounty hunting, you're going to be a little bit more liberal on your expenditure. With something like Warzones, you want something that's a little bit more expendable, and something that's more survivable. So that's why I've got the Cobra here, and I've actually upgraded this. I'm still have yet to put the upgraded bulkheads on it, so that's something I haven't done yet, but the shield generator's been upgraded, and I've switched over all the weapons. So normally I like to use multi-cannons, and they don't seem to work so well on the Cobra because of the positionings of the hardpoints. So I've actually switched that up significantly, and I'm using gimbaled pulse lasers. The reason being is that because the Cobra doesn't turn as well as something like an Eagle, I'm going to have to compensate for its handling by having something that can aim off axis a little bit more. And with the position of the small hardpoints being further away, I have something that can actually aim closer to the center, so I have to use gimbals instead of fixed hardpoints. And finally, I'm using pulse lasers because actually I was looking for beam lasers, but they didn't have them. So I'm using lasers because they don't use ammo. So I don't have to worry about ammunition expenditure. I tried this with multi-cannons and missile racks, but I found that I couldn't last as long in Warzones because you run out of ammo very quickly, and multi-cannons alone don't do enough damage, so you need something to supplement it. So going with the pulse lasers does a reasonable amount of damage both against shield and against hull plating. So that's why I've used that. Generally, you want to keep your costs down as much as possible, and at the same time, you want to maximize your survivability and your just how long you can last inside a war zone, because it is going to get very chaotic very quickly. So, without further ado, let's launch this baby and head off to a war zone. Alright, once you've left the station, you can actually see what we're looking at. So Warzones will show up on your navigation map as a conflict zone. So you can see highlighted right here, we've got two conflict zones. Now they come in two forms, high intensity and low intensity, and occasionally there can even be distress signals and so forth, which are also another form of Warzones. So conflict zones, these can appear at any place at any time, and the only way to really know where they're going to be next is by following the news on the Galnet, and occasionally Frontier Developments does tweet out major conflict zones on their official Twitter, but for the most part, keeping up with the news on Galnet, they drop little hints of where conflicts are starting and which systems that are going to be under conflict. So right now I'm in the Gleis 868 system, and this area is currently being disputed by different factions within the Federation itself. So there's actually even lore that's hidden within these different conflicts as well. So all of these are actually within the Federation itself. So it's going to look a little bit interesting. So we're going to lock destination to this high intensity conflict zone, and we're going to super cruise our way over. Alright, we're going to bring the ship to a stop here, and you can already see the screen just lighting up with lasers going everywhere, railguns being fired, cannons, missiles, and all sorts of things. But we're not being targeted by any of these. Right, these are actually completely, in fact, for the most part, because I'm actually friendly with the Federation, you can see that everybody's actually green to me right now. And that's because, if we'll just target one now, and I'll show you what's going on. So this Python is actually a Federal Navy ship. And let's have a look at the one he's shooting at. Over here, it's a Federal dropship, is also a Federal Navy ship. So you're thinking, what's going on? You know, there's two factions that are the same. They're shooting at each other because they're both part of different parties. So if I head over to the Functions tab, and this is how you get started, by the way, do not engage any of the ships immediately. This is very important. Like, for example, right now, you can see these are actually clean. They're not wanted or anything. There's no bounties on them. So shooting at these will constitute a crime, and because these are Federal Navy, they'll all immediately attack you. So do not do it. What you need to do is head over to the Functions tab over on your right hand menu and go to this highlighted bit at the top which says faction. Select that and you'll have a choice of one of two factions. Now, in some cases, Warzones do glitch out or seem to reach a phase where there's only one party remaining. In that case, there's nothing you can really do there. But if there's two, you can choose one or the other. So right now, I've actually been stationed at Baconport, which is under Glass Industry. So I figured, let's go with them instead. So you'll see what happens immediately when I select one of these. Alright, and immediately you can see some of these have turned red, because some of these are now immediately hostile, and that means we can engage them. Right, we are now fighting for one of the factions. So we can actually start attacking one of these. And I've already overheated. This is the downside of having so many lasers, by the way, is that you do overheat very quickly. And you can see I haven't received any bounty or any fines for attacking this guy, because this is completely legal now. It would be illegal if we hadn't chosen a faction yet, so just remember to always do that before you get into it. Okay, so I think he's dead. And there you go, you can see right there at the top right, Bond received 3,000 credits. And that's really all there is to it. It's very similar, like I said, it's very similar to bounty hunting, but this is a very highly populated area, and you can see there's so many hostiles here. And unlike bounty hunting, where everybody's kind of neutral to each other until one attacks, in this case, they will attack you immediately. They don't wait. So any one of these red hostiles can immediately engage me, and you can find yourself in a situation where you're fighting more than one at a time. So it helps to do this in a group where somebody can watch your back, essentially. It is definitely much safer to have a wingman with you, to kind of watch you, you know, cover you. Because once a group of them start shooting you, you might as well bail. Also, one thing to take note of, you cannot switch factions once you are once you have chosen one in a war zone. The only way to leave that faction is to then leave the war zone. So you actually have to jump out before you'll return to neutral. And when you jump back in, provided you're not hostile with any of the actual overall factions, you'll see everybody return to green. There's no lasting implications for taking part in this at all.
Under attack.
And if, for example, if this conflict zone happens to be between two of the major factions, for example, between Federation and an Empire, choosing one side over the other can actually help you gain reputation, I believe, with that particular faction that you choose. In this case, because both sides are Federation, you might imagine we'd probably lose reputation, but surprisingly, no. I'm still friendly with them, because both parties are within Federation. So there doesn't seem to be any lasting implications for doing this. And you can see here I've already been targeted by this asp over here who started shooting at me. So we're going to quickly claim another bond before leaving. One thing is that if you're doing this alone, you do not want to stay in the war zone for too long, because as you gain more attention, as you destroy more ships at a time, you'll get the attention of others within that faction, and that's when you don't want to be staying around too long. Right now I actually have 2 ships attacking me at once. There's Asp that I've targeted and another ship that's actually firing at me. So this is a situation where I probably want to get out of here, because I can't actually evade as well in a Cobra as I might be able to in other ships. Bearing in mind that this is a much larger target as well, and it's not as fast as something like a Viper, so evasive maneuver is going to be a little bit tricky. Yeah, it's got plasma accelerators.
Under attack.
But for all intents and purposes, the actual mechanics of Warzones are just very similar to bounty hunting. It's just that the way you approach it is very different, because as you can see here, I'm not attacking one target at a time. I'm simultaneously being attacked and searching for targets of opportunity at the same time. So it's very different in the sense that rather than, for example, in bounty hunting, you get the time to scan your target and wait, and you're for the most part safe from everything else except the one that you're attacking. In this case, just being here makes me a target, and as you can imagine, you'd want to be a little bit more survivable in that sense. I've also noticed that the NPCs shooting at each other don't seem to do as much damage. In fact, they don't seem to do any damage at all, I've noticed sometimes. So it gets a little bit difficult when you're attacking a larger target and you're expecting, you know, the NPCs to back you up, even though they're shooting at the same target. It doesn't seem to have the same effect that your weapons do. So going at this with a group is definitely the more survivable option in that sense. Unlike bounty hunting, where you can attack an anaconda solo quite easily with most ships, for example Vipers or Cobras, or even the Eagle if you're so inclined. In this, it doesn't work that way, because not only are the ships a lot better equipped, you're usually facing off against them and their wingmen, so they can damage you quite well as well. Put it this way, you're not going to be attacking them alone, you're going to be attacking them and their friends. So it's the safest option is to bring some friends with you.
Target shields online.
Now, of course, as I say that, not everybody plays this game with friends. A lot of people like to play this solo, so if that's the case, finding a populated system with Warzones might be your best option.
Target destroyed.
I think I should jump out of here before
Cannot comply.
my shields completely deplete. Put some more power into the systems there. So you can also find Warzones. Maybe you could jump around between the war zones, because there's going to be several conflict zones within one system. There's not going to be just one. It's very rare that there's just one. It's normally a bunch of them at a time. And you can go between them and see if there are any players playing there. You can lock onto them and see which faction they're aligned with and join them instead, so you can work together with them. So that's another option you can take. But this is one of the few places where PvP is something that you can actively engage in, and as more players come into the game, it's likely you'll see a lot more players going after the war zones to kind of get into the faction warfare and do a lot more PvP. Because right now, PvP is kind of limited to kind of banditry and piracy, and this is one way where you can have player versus player happening without all the sort of risks involved of getting a bounty and wanted level and everything. And it can actually benefit you in a big way. Because it can help you with Federation reputations, or rather faction reputations, and it can also help you earn some money along the way, provided you've outfitted your ship accordingly. But that's really the gist of it, is you want to be able to stay in war zones for as long as possible, while sustaining as little damage as possible, and destroying as much as possible. So, low cost, high damage, and preferably something that you find expendable. Like, this Cobra might be a bit excessive, because this is 36,000 credits rebuy. And remember, bounties and combat bonds don't come back with you when you die. So you lose whatever you've earned. So staying alive is extremely important. So in this case, I mean, it might even be better for me to switch over to a Viper that's less well equipped, because I could save a little bit of money on the rebuy. But that's a risk-reward factor that you can go. And going with the Cobra or a better equipped ship might make you a little bit more effective in the combat zone, but it might also mean that you lose more. So that's something that you have to balance out very effectively. Alright, the last thing we're going to show before we end this video is how do you claim combat bonds? Because combat bonds are not the same as bounties, but these are treated very, very similarly and thankfully located in the same place. So once you go into your station services, make sure that you go to the ones that are similar faction to what you were playing with. Bear in mind that if it are in a conflict zone that has one major faction, for example, we were fighting Federation versus Federation, you can go to any Federation station in that system and claim either one. I've tested this out and it works, but let me know if it doesn't for you, because it might, it might just be me. But I've noticed I can claim combat bonds for both factions. Okay, so next thing you do is go into your contacts menu, and now, normally for bounties, you'd go over to local security office. In this case, you go to combat bond contact, and you can see here we've got the Goliath 868 Industries, and we've got 9,000 credits from the 3 ships we destroyed. And we can just go ahead and quickly claim those. And that's all there is to it. It's treated very similar to bounties, it's just under a different menu. So combat bonds are here, and bounties are up here. And that's it. So, yes, to wrap this up, really, it's very similar to bounty hunting. Just the philosophy is trying to have an outfitting that will last as long as possible without costing too much, because your profits per kill are going to go down if you're using very high cost ammo. So that's one thing to bear in mind. It's a similar thing that you would bear in mind for bounty hunting, but in conflict zones even more so, because nearly every ship is worth the same amount. So you're not going to see, for example, drop ships that are worth 20,000. You're not going to see that in a conflict zone, because they're not wanted criminals. They are still the same as the others. So in fact, the best tactic might be to go after the weaker ships and still get the same amount of money for it, because as I've shown there, I got 3,000 credits for an Eagle kill and 3,000 credits for an Asp kill. It's not worth risking going after the bigger targets unless you know for sure you can take them down. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. Thank you very much for watching, and from all of us here at Bacon Port, my name is Panzer, and I'll see you next time.